The following is a CNN special report.
A monster.
It's my world.
A madman.
I run with a pack of wolves, and I've got to be a wolf.
A mastermind of one of the most horrific killing sprees in U.S. history.
What do you think's gonna happen when I get out?
The savagery that went on that night, it is incomprehensible.
I'm a runaway little girl at 15 years old out of Kentucky named Kathleen Maddox. I didn't have a husband. My husband's name was Scott. And he married somebody else and went down the road, and she went to Cincinnati and had a guy named Charlie Manson.
Charles Manson was born on November 12, 1934 in Cincinnati, Ohio, in Cincinnati General Hospital. His mother, Kathleen Maddox, was just 16 and unmarried when he was born. His father was a Colonel Scott who'd briefly known Kathleen.
She was very, very motherly looking. She was as motherly looking as my mother was.
My mother went to prison for 5 years for strong-arm robbery. Her brother had to deal a trick in off the street and put the yoke on him to get some money to eat.
But when I heard she was a prostitute, I couldn't believe that either.
And she went to prison, and I used to visit her in the prison visiting room.
His mother's absence and rejection would make a life with her a dream of Charles Manson's throughout his childhood. Manson spent many of his early years in the small town of McMecken, West Virginia, with his deeply religious aunt and uncle, living, by all appearances, a not unhappy small-town life.
The house was a big, older house, but it was beautiful. He had just about anything he wanted, I would say. His aunt and uncle and grandmother took him to church. He didn't like going. The only thing he really liked, was the singing. But Charles loved to sing.
But some of Manson's outlook on the world came from another uncle, a mountain man.
Out of the Kentucky mountains, when my uncle said, "We ain't surrendered. We're still rebels, and we'll be rebels until the end of time, because I ain't accepting no Yankee school." He said, "Don't go to those schools, boy." So when I was 9 years old, I set the school on fire, and I went to reform school.
Between 1942 and 1947, Manson spent periods of time with his mother and her assorted lovers around.
The only thing my mother taught me was that everything she said was a lie, and I learned never to believe anyone.
Murder by proxy. Manson was convicted of 7 counts of first-degree murder for his role in driving his devoted followers to homicide. That being said, Manson wasn't directly involved in all the events which took place on August 9th and 10th in 1969, although he did accompany his group on the second night.
A small, bizarre character named Charles Manson was charged with provoking his apparently fanatic followers to commit the crimes.
Instead, he manipulated and ordered his followers to commit the Tate LaBianca murders in his name, capitalizing on the almost messianic hold he had over his so-called family.
And when I got out, all your children would come to me because they never had anybody to tell them the truth.
This was thanks to the group's communal, cult-like existence on the Spawn Ranch, where Manson and his family often indulged in heavy psychedelic drug use and orgies, all of which Manson oversaw as the unquestioned leader. This control made it possible for Manson to induce cult members Susan Atkins, Linda Kasabian, Patricia Krenwinkel, Leslie Van Houten, and Charles Tex.
But then you substitute your own philosophy. It's like wiping the blackboard clean and then introducing your philosophy, and then you become the absolute leader.
Bit by bit, the family became one with Manson.
One of his things was to stop you during the day, and he'd put your palms up to his, and then he'd move them in any direction that he could. Or he'd make a series of faces, and then you were supposed to try to keep up with them. And the whole thing was always geared toward just complete mirroring of him.
One powerful way that Manson maintained control was through drugs, particularly LSD.
Well, we took hundreds of trips together.
The acid trips were exercises in total control.
with Charlie, he actually did almost like drug programming. I mean, he was the focal point at all times. And what seems so amazing is that he somehow, because acid is a very powerful drug, and it's like I would feel like totally out of control, and yet I would watch him and he would seem totally in control. One of the things, when I look back, I realized I didn't always see him take acid. I don't think he did. The idea was to get rid of all the conditioning, to die in yourself. So he would hold you up and say something to you. Say, see, I can see your mother on you. It's still the conditioning. You know, you haven't gotten rid of it. You're not dead yet.
Sometimes he would reenact the crucifixion when we were on LSD. And it was very realistic. I would die for you. And then the questions would begin, would you die for me?
And what was the philosophy that Manson was offering? It had begun with the notion of oneness and the power of love, but over time, it grew steadily more paranoid. The messages to the family grew steadily darker. There was no right or wrong, and life and death were really the same thing.
It was August 9th, 1969, a hot summer morning. The sunrise would cast a light on one of the darkest chapters in Los Angeles history.
I don't think that any of us who were there, we were the first television crew on the scene. We had no idea what we were walking into.
That morning, Al Wyman was an ambitious 29-year-old reporter for ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
And we got a call from the assignment desk telling us to go to a house in Beverly Hills at 1005.
The killers used Tate's blood to write "pig" on the front door, a macabre message that shocked and confused the city. And it wasn't over. The next night in Silver Lake, Rosemary and Lino LaBianca, random, horribly unlucky victims, killed almost the same brutal way. Death to pigs written in their blood on the wall, helter-skelter on the refrigerator.
And then when all the words came out, or news came out about what was inside, how they were killed, there was an element of fear, yes.
Eyewitness News Inland Empire Bureau Chief Bob Banfield recalls how the city was petrified and thirsty for information as he canvassed the LaBianca neighborhood, talked.
I stabbed Mrs. LaBianca in the lower back about 16 times.
The scene at the LaBiancas was no less macabre than that at the Tate house. A carving fork protruded from Lino LaBianca's stomach, a knife protruded from his throat, and the word "war" was carved in his flesh. Mrs. LaBianca was in the bedroom, her head covered by a pillowcase with a lamp cord tied around her neck. And on the walls, written in their blood, were the words, "Death to pigs," and "Rise," and on the refrigerator door, the words, "Helter Skelter."
I said, if you're gonna do something, leave something with you. Just like I would tell you, if you're gonna do something, do it well, and leave something with you.
I thought because you don't understand me, I don't understand you either. But I don't spend my whole life trying to put the blame over on you because my cigarette didn't light or because something didn't work right. What do you want to call me a murderer for? I've never killed anyone. I don't need to kill anyone. I think it. I have it here. I don't need to live in this physical realm. I walk around in the physical realm, and I put on the faces, and I talk, and I play, and it's this big act, man. In the spiritual world is where I live. I exist in places you never even dreamed of. I'm just another guy walking down the road going, how many times I got to go to the where's God at? See, I've got a face, and I pray for what is it? I'm an old man. All I want to do is retire. Get on the desert and be left alone. I don't want to bother nobody. I'm hiding out underneath the rock. They come to me and say, hey, Charlie, hi. I said, what do you want? You want to talk? I said, about what? We got problems.
People look at you today, 20 years later, and they still have no idea what you're about. Tell me in a sentence who you are.
Nobody. I'm nobody. I'm a tramp, a bum, a hobo. I'm a boxcar and a jug of wine. And a straight razor if you get too close to me.